Hello, everybody. Welcome to our bonus edition of Spilling the Spirituality. I'm here with my friend and fellow host, Hilary. Hello, Hilary.
Hello, Rob. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's rainy and cold, but I feel all warm on the inside. What can I say? So,
Oh, nice, nice. Uh, so here's our bonus recording today. One of the things I was just talking to Rob about is this feeling that I'm getting in my counseling sessions, how people don't know who they are anymore, how they've sort of lost touch with themselves. And mostly it seems to stem from overworked and possibly too much technology, and they're feeling anxious and they're not sleeping, and it almost seems like all of this started when everyone got the blessing of being able to work at home because of COVID, but it created a monster, and it seems like people are working twice as long as they used to work when they were, in the office, and now they're working with their kids around them and their husband or wife or partner around them, and they're not getting any peace. So this is kind of something I thought we could talk about today, sort
yeah.
of rediscovering the self again.
Well, and it's happening in a world where, we've been not only COVID, but there's a lot of stuff going on around us. We just had an election season and, I think we all still feel like we're living on the brink. Um,
Yeah.
I marvel when I hear stories about people and work. Like, again, I've not been into the 9 to 5 world for several years now, but I've worked with people like you. I teach spinning class in the gym, and so there's this cycle of the world where um, uh, the people that were kind of eased up on stuff, or that we had scattered schedules because we had to accommodate this new work from home paradigm, and slowly but surely those are all getting whittled back to the way that it was before. And so I'm hearing from members of the gym, like everybody needs to have that early class now that they didn't, they can't get. So they're getting back in. And I had been so relieved for a while when COVID was happening, because I thought one of the most beautiful things about it was that it was a reset. Like, as horrifying as much of it was, those that maybe have not been affected by the horror, even that have, are responsible for making a change to ensure this kind of thing isn't going to happen again, or we're going to discover that we were too strung out from our everything. And I'm a little upset to hear that office hours are returning to normal. Traffic is back up. I just saw a headline about DC being one of the worst places in the country. It's like, oh wait, people, have we learned nothing? Um, and the fact that I have lived in DC for almost 30 years, and one of the things that made me feel so alienated from people who lived here, especially my generation, or my cohort of transient people here, was that I'd never felt like I had that, um, the ambition or the drive that most of my peers did. Like, it's never been a part of my existence. And when you live in a world where it's about working harder, and people brag about, they never took their vacation days, and I'd be like, but that's your salary. That's like saying, here, I don't need this amount of money. Why do you negotiate a salary if you're going to give back your personal time off? So yeah, it's hard because I can't relate to it. And I'm working on helping hold the line for the changes that were being made that were so positive, which I think you probably are too. So
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, there have been many times where I've been in, neighborhood. So Rob's in DC and I'm, in the suburbs in Maryland. And here there are less people that are commuting to the office. Most of the people, in fact, my entire street works from home, except for my husband. But everybody else works from home, and they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying that they're working 10 times harder. And it is interesting because I, like you know, I used to have a regular job for the federal government. But man, the second that it was time for me to leave, which would be like 5 o'clock, I was a bat out of hell. And I remember I would get outside and I'd take in a big breath of air and I'd be like, oh, thank God, you know, like I also have never yearned to be a workaholic, but we've been taught, at least in this area, you know, maybe it's more laid back in other areas. We're in a pretty intense area in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. I've often felt like people would look at me like, well, what do you do all day? You know, as if I'm not producing enough or
Right.
I'm not busy enough or whatever. And now I'm watching people are coming apart. They're so anxious, they're not sleeping. Because they're working so hard. And so I feel like this is like a call to action, maybe because both you and I kind of never bought into that system.
Right.
um, we can sort of teach how to return to yourself, how to find yourself, because the only way you're ever going to be content is, you know, feeling this internal guidance that's supposed to direct you in every moment of every day. And I think we've so been taught to look externally for everything. Did you read this article? Did you see this? Did you hear this TED talk? Did you listen to what the president said? Did you hear this? To sort of the CDC to sort of guide all of our decisions, when we have this beautiful system that does it for us. So often with clients, I find myself saying, okay, I hear that that's what they're saying, but what do you feel? And a lot of times the answer is, I don't know. Right.
Yeah, because you don't know what you want because everybody else is telling you what you should want or what is important. Again, we don't have kids, so I've never had to like, juggle the multiple responsibilities, and combined with the fact that it's never been a value of mine. And what makes me sad is I remember, and we were talking about what city, this is an intense city, but even before I moved here, my hometown of Pittsburgh, PA, I had a boss that sent one of her assistants to tell me that she was aware that I was walking out the door at 5 every day when the official office hours were closed, and that concerned her. And so it was shocking to me. Like, wait, but this is the time that you said in the employee handbook we're supposed to be here, and now I'm getting reprimanded for leaving at the employee handbook time. And I started to I thought, well, this really pains me, but I'm going to play the game. So I started putting in time after 5, but I didn't work. Like, I just was there in the office. I was there so that whoever was supposed to see me in my office saw me. And then lo and behold, like at the end of the year, this person comes back, the assistant comes back up to me because, she said, yeah, she's really happy that, she sees you're staying later and you're working more. I'm like, oh my God, this is how shallow the whole thing is. Like, it's a
Yeah.
scam.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
um,
important. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, what hurt was that I'm not even, I never even experienced that feeling of not wanting to leave at 5, really, until I became the pastor of ISD, really, because it was like, then I understood at least what it was like to have the passion for something, to lose myself in time, or to feel compelled to get something together because that's what I needed for something that I was overseeing. But it wasn't because I was competing with my colleague for a position, or it did come from within, and I was relieved to feel the passion. But I had challenges to boundaries in that time too, and I put up a force field, like no, this is just not an option. I'm not going to argue it. That I'm just going to say, please, I'm not. You can email me after this time or whatever as much as you want. but I'm not available at that time, or I'm,
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that you have to have pretty firm boundaries, especially in this day and age, especially if you have a tech job or something where you can do it 24/7 because all you need is that internet connection and your computer. Um, and maybe that's part of, I mean, it seems like the expectation of the employers, like Twitter, for instance,
exactly.
right? Um, that, okay, well, we want you to work 60 plus hours and we're not going to give you any more money for it. And I just want to give a shout out to a friend I know who's a nurse who is also in a situation where a lot of the nurses have quit. They're so overworked, they're exhausted. It's a very physical job. And they expect her to do the work of 5 people. And she flat out said no. And she said, look, I'm going to do the best I can. I am here for the patients. I am not sacrificing their care. And if you want to fire me, that's up to you. Knowing full well, they're not going to fire her because
Right.
not a lot of people want to work to that hard in that industry. And I think that that's part of the solution, which is to stand up, to stand up to this system or this boss or whatever without the fear of being let go. Because if you're good at what you do, you'll find, I mean, right now, there's so many people who also don't want to work. So there are a lot of jobs out there. Once you get past that fear of like, well, if I don't work 60 hours, they're going to let me go. They're not going to let you go. They need you. And I notice, like my husband's really good with boundaries. And just like what you just said, look, you can send me emails, you can whatever, but I stop at this time. When you speak that way with a knowing and you're just stating your truth and your intention is simply to state the truth, um, what can they do?
Right. Well, and I think, and if you stand by it, so you don't just say it, because it does mean that you've got to toe your own line if you say you're not available after a certain time, for instance, and then watch that, we'll go back to this goes back to the technology issue, but watch that phone, start to blow up with someone who's trying to get a hold of you and just not respond. Like, not because just because that's your boundary. The minute you set a precedent is the minute people are going to have expectations. Of course, emergencies happen. Of course, you have to have your own internal kind of awareness of what's an emergency and what's not. But, I think when you start off right away of not just saying it, but then not doing it, not responding, that's when it becomes absurd. So you don't respond to your boss at 2 o'clock in the morning. On paper, they're not going to fire you for that. Like, this, I mean, they may,
Right.
but is it worth it for you to be available at that time? I think this is a time that we have to question what is really important in our lives, which I thought we were doing at the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
And it did. But
And
boy,
some are,
some
some
are.
are. I mean, I definitely know people who have moved, who have made significant changes, who have left high pressure jobs to sort of get a slower, easier gig, maybe making less money, but a lot happier. I definitely think some people really were moved and affected by this time period, but I still think that the mass is still buying into this work, 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 work at the cost of everything else. And and now to sort of gear the conversation to technology a little bit. And then there's also, we're taking in so much information constantly that even when maybe you aren't working, like our brain isn't meant to consume as much information that we're consuming. And they say that it's not staying within us, it's like it's overload. And I was telling Rob before we started that recently I've kind of changed my diet and made it a little bit better, and I'm hearing my guidance better lately. And I've been hearing like little things, when you lay in bed in the morning and you're like, I'll just get on my phone for like 30 minutes and 30 minutes turns into an hour. And I was hearing like, don't you want to move your body? Don't you want to do a little bit of yoga? And it's hard to get out of that warm bed or whatever. But I've been kind of listening, and I've also been hearing, try to put your phone down when you're making dinner, or try and put your phone down when you're getting ready in the morning. Can you just be present with the activity? And I'm noticing it definitely calms the whole system down, you dig what I'm saying?
I do. I do. I feel like the information overload is a real thing because not only are we getting information overload from news headlines and everything else, but of course we've got the social media accounts where you're comparing yourself to other people. That's also, for me personally, that's always been a huge an issue. Um, that being said, I know that the one of the blessings of technology has been the just the creative inspiration that allows that you can leverage to kind of thrive. So for me, it's like I want this balance of making sure that I'm not getting sucked for 2 hours down a hole, which is very easy to do. But at the same time, when I'm using it to create, even a reel that promotes our podcast or something, it's that I love that. I'm filled by that. I know that I would happily give, an hour to figuring out the right filter or the right, the right message that I want to say, or putting something to that with the music that works. So I love the creative part of it. But I also realize that if I'm not engaged in things that make me either compare myself to other people or see horrible headlines, that, my mood starts to lift a little bit. So
Right.
it's just a balance.
The
And
balance.
I feel like when we meditate in my meditations on Wednesday, I'm finally getting to a point where it's like, it's not getting into a still space to hear your voice is not about eliminating the chaos. We can't, we live in it, but it is about learning, perhaps little by little, how to be still in spite of it all. So while we always encourage people to get into a place where it's quiet, you can't be disturbed, because of Zoom and because of our technology, that's not always possible when you're doing a Zoom meditation. I've got ambient noise in my background. You've got ambient noise in yours. Let's not pretend like that doesn't exist, or that our kids are going to come to the door. Our cat's not going to walk across the computer. Let's work with that. The chaos is always there. So can we little by little begin to find that space so that anything could be happening around us and we're still going to be able to get to that space? So it's not an absence of the noise, or stillness is not an absence of sound or diversions, but it is an absence from the noise that we invest in with around us. So I want to get to a space where I can sit out in the middle of a bunch of chaos and sirens and everything and still find it in my heart and in my soul to be quiet. I'm not there, but it does. But if we start feeling like we have to shut it all off, because we don't, we can learn that when it's within, it can be done anytime. So,
Well, and if it's dire enough that you need to shut it all off. It
absolutely. Oh,
depends
sure.
where
Absolutely.
your nervous system is. If you aren't sleeping, if you are anxious all the time, if you find yourself not being able to stay in the present moment and projecting like, how am I going to get this done? Da, da, da. Like, those are indications that, I mean, Rob and I feel a little differently about this issue, probably because I'm more of a yeah, shut it off, and that's what works for me. And for Rob, I mean, it sounds like for you, you're able to balance that in a way where it doesn't upset your nervous system or whatever. But for me, I can feel when I've taken in too much information. I can feel when I look away from my phone, my eyes can't focus. Um, I feel in a way about a lot of things. I find my thoughts coming up of judgment, either for myself or for others. So for me, shutting it down means quiet. But I get what you're saying. I mean, it's always quiet in here if you can learn to connect to it. But I would think most people aren't experts at doing that. That's very tricky to do. That's the master who can be quiet inside while there's chaos everywhere. I mean, of course, that's where there are moments I can get there, but if I'm going to meditate, or if I want to feel what's coming up to be, I would need to get outside, be in nature, or I would need to just move slower in my day. How about you? Like for
I,
you?
well, I mean, we're on a podcast, which we're helping people listen to on their devices. So, there's always that caveat of we're engaging in this discussion in a space that, I don't want to say don't get off. I'm like you trying to carve out a space in the space that we're saying, just be aware of it. But I do, you know, for me, it's been like I realize time goes like when I've gone down, you know, an Amazon hole, like, or a YouTube hole. So it's like, no, I can be seduced to be thrown off my mark, by technology. So I do see where it's an issue. But we live in a world where it's a part of our world too. So it's like we have to be integrated with it enough to know ourselves to not get not I click on those things when that algorithm works and that product pops up. I'm like, oh, okay. And I went on to my social media with the intent of making my reel or doing all those things that we want to do for this. So it's for me the discipline of not being distracted. And just like having a work-life balance, knowing that you are in a space where you're choosing, okay, I need to be here because this is what we do. This is where we are. This is my workspace. But I don't need to be a slave to it when I've chosen to do something else. So if I'm, it's about being in the now. If I'm eating dinner, if I'm having a conversation, again, I love technology. I don't like when I go and I see everybody on their phones, um,
While they're eating a meal at a
yeah,
restaurant.
yeah. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think it's knowing when to get on and off the bus, right? On one level, technology brings people together. On the other level, technology separates people. So it's like, finding that fine line in the middle, which truly, now that we're talking, that's true with everything.
do with everything, right?
It's true with
Exactly.
food. It's true with consumption, buying things. It's true with relationships. I mean, we always want to try and ride that middle wave, because if we're too far over here, then the relationship's not healthy. Or if we're too far over here with our job, then the rest of our life isn't balanced. So it's I guess what we're both saying is it's learning to find this balance. And inherently when you're not balanced. And just based on the clients that I'm seeing recently, the sampling that I'm seeing is too far over here, and they know it and they don't want it. That's why they're coming to me. They want to try and remember who they were before all that started. So I guess with the time that we have left, maybe we could give some ideas of how to find that self again. Like, do you have anything that you do when you feel overwhelmed or you don't feel like yourself? How do you come back to your home?
That's a great question. I engage in something that I love to do. So the times that I have forgotten that I didn't even have my phone, that's for me, that's the most release. Like not when I've said I've got to put it down and look at it, but when I've engaged in something that did not include my phone. So, I do some crafts that I do, or I mix music. It's on my computer, but I've put aside the call or the beckon of the notifications. So, and there's that, like, yes, you can have all those things going. If you turn off the temptation, if you turn off those notifications, that also helps. But I also think that getting involved in something that is, takes you away, that brings you out of that space where you can go, oh my gosh, I haven't checked my phone in 2 hours. Not because I was trying hard to not do it, because I was engaged in this experience with my friend, or I was, knitting a scarf or whatever. That thing that takes you to a place where you don't even think about it is a key for me.
So for you, it sounds like it's sort of a creative space,
Yes.
oftentimes. And I agree because I have an art room that I go make some things and I put some music on and I just lose complete track of time. So that's a great idea for our audience, is to remember what it is that brought you joy. And if you're not sure what that was, I always tell people to go back in the day when they were, kids. What did you lose all track of time? Because those interests are probably still there. I mean, if PE, do people say PE anymore? If physical education or whatever was your thing, like if that was, during the school day, you loved running around, maybe you need some sort of physical exercise to bring you that balance. If art class was what stimulated you back in the day, then do some art, do any art, start with a coloring book, but something that brings you joy. And if you really don't know, I would say take a bath, take a walk, um, sit in nature, listen to music. What else?
Again,
Write.
yeah, engage in some way, in a way that doesn't feel like you're being a slave to it. We all go down holes. There are those holes that, like, again, I after the end of the time that I realize I've been taken away, I feel like I've been enriched. So, and then there's those times it's like, oh, I inserted, this is why I don't do as much in my day as I once did, is because without me really realizing it, you know, scrolling through Instagram, again, I use Instagram and I want everybody to watch those things that I put on there and to promote it. But getting seduced by everybody's input is, probably not the best use of time when I'm supposed to be doing something else. So maybe you set aside that time to have your scrolling time and just, set the timer,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, to say get off technology would be ridiculous. I mean, I love technology. There's lots of great benefits and things that I learn on being on technology, and I connect with people I don't get to see anymore. I mean, Rob and I don't see each other physically so much, but we connect on Zoom, and I'm so grateful for that.
Me too.
It's better than a telephone. So I don't think that we're trying to say, no technology, just finding a natural balance, doing things that bring you joy, remembering who you are. Because the thing is, when you hear your higher self or your intuition or whatever you want to call it speak, it's always taking you to the highest place for yourself, the best place for yourself. And it's a quiet voice, and you really can't hear it unless you're alone, I think. I mean, no, that's not true, because I hear it a lot of times when I'm counseling, or if I'm in a really good discussion, something will drop in. But I'm talking about those directives that are specific to me. I usually only hear if I'm in a creative space like that. If I'm doing something alone, that's when I hear it, or even just, sitting quietly meditating or whatever it is. We need the days back where we used to daydream and look at the clouds go by, and we need some of that, not all of that, just some of that.
Well, and I think that's why you hear people talk about they get their best ideas when they're in the shower in the morning, like, because that's everything's, you're in the shower with yourself. Like, that's it's never going to be anything but, you're in the shower with your thoughts and yourself, and you're free when you're doing that. So, finding that space where you're getting replenished is, I think, the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so as we close, because it's time to say goodbye. I just want to offer that, if you need help with this is what Rob and I do. I am a counselor, life coach, and a spiritual teacher, and I can give you techniques on how to calm your shit down so you can start being guided from the inside out. And I'm just saying this on this recording. I am willing to offer your first session free. And we can meet on any platform of your choosing. And would you like to plug anything, Ron?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, always available. You know, I've said earlier on, you know, first reading, first spiritual session is also free. So yeah. And I do a Wednesday night meditation. Like, get something where if you don't feel like you can do it on your own, you can join. You can use your technology, but we're going to take you to a space where we're aware of everything, including the technology, but you're still going inside. So uh, some people don't like to get to that space on their own. We can help you get there. All you got to do is turn it on, and we will guide you to a place that is beyond the technology that we're using to get you there.
And when is that? When can people do
Wednesday
it?
nights at 7:30
Eastern Standard.
Eastern Standard Time. Yes. So
Eastern Standard Time. Yeah. So you've got, people right at your fingertips who will help you get back to who you really are. And it's really important because that is ultimately how you live your best life. And that's what both of our intention is. This is why we do these talks. So thanks so much for listening,
thank you. And thank
everyone.
you. Yes, we appreciate it. We appreciate you. And we might see you on another bonus episode before our season starts after the first of the year. But until then,
Peace out.
peace out.